everyone, welcome once again to Pop Culture Comics in Overland Park, Kansas. I'm Captain Logan, and it's time once again for brand new comic book reviews. I didn't do a review show last week, so this week I'm going to do something a little bit different. I'm going to still do Cap Picks 3, but I'm actually going to be doing more like Cap Picks 6. What I'm going to do is I'm going to pick my top 3 Marvel books for the last 2 weeks, and my top 3 DC books for the last 2 weeks, and then I'll still do an indie book and a kids book a little bit later. These are also going to be more rapid-fire reviews. I'm going to start with Spider-Girl number 8 for my number 3 for Marvel this week. Right in the middle of trying to find her friends who have been kidnapped by the Raven group, Spider-Girl suddenly has spider powers and doesn't know how she got them. Of course, it's because of what's going on in the Spider Island arc in Amazing Spider-Man. It's fun watching her explore her new powers, which aren't exactly like Spider-Man's. Hers come with a sort of invisibility. She goes up against the Raven group alone while waiting for Red Hulk and Spider-Man to show up, and she ultimately has to make one of those big Spider-Man with great power type decisions. The whole thing's wrapped up a little too quick for my taste, and the moral is a little obvious, but it's also a very Spider-Man type message. It's enough to make me like this Spider-Girl, though, who I've never read before, and she reminds me a little of the Stephanie Brown Batgirl, a little in over her head and a little cocky, but good at what she does, generally with less to work with than the bigger superheroes. And for my number 3 DC book, I've picked Batman Incorporated, number 7. This is an excellent standalone story about the third world Batman and Robin, as Man of Bats and Raven refer to themselves. A really interesting dynamic is revealed between the father and son duo, who do a lot with a little as costume crime fighters, but Raven is unhappy that they haven't moved on to a big city to fight supervillains. He mentions that he's almost too old to join the Teen Titans, instead of staying in such a poor town that doesn't even have restaurants or a movie theater to fight drug dealers and wife beaters. But Man of Bats believes in what they're doing, and he's a really endearing character. This is the closest to what I'd figure, quote, real-life superheroes might be like that I've seen in a comic. When Batman gets to them and finds their headquarters, where they charge tourists to look at their, quote, secret bat cave, he's genuinely impressed. He calls them Batman on a budget. Of course, to continue on with the ongoing Batman Inc. plot, Leviathan has found them, and Batman is there to help them fight Leviathan off. If you're not reading the series, I recommend this issue. It reads fine alone, and it's a good commentary on poor dying towns and the people who still love them enough to fight for them. Number 2 for Marvel, we're going to take a look at Fear Itself, number 4. The plot is really starting to thicken as the Avengers learn more about what's happening with the Worthy as they hold the world in their grip of fear. They finally figure out that the Serpent is behind it, a terrifying god who believes Asgard is rightfully his and that Odin took it from him, and that's why he's doing this. There are a lot of great character moments I won't spoil, especially for Steve Rogers, who has to, of course, retake his mantle of Captain America after the events of last issue, and what Tony Stark does toward the end is just stunning. I have to admit I was really surprised by it. This event is getting more epic, and I'm liking it more and more as it goes along. Gripping action on a huge scale and a lot of storytelling really coming together. Don't really want to say any more. And number 2 for DC, I'm going to go for Batman Night of Vengeance, number 2. Lots of thrilling twists and turns in this one, and lots of great fan service. We get to see this alternate history's version of Oracle and the Joker, and both come as a surprise, just like Batman's identity did at the end of Flashpoint number 1. But Joker here is just a bizarre, bizarre shocker. This thing is creepy and wrong, and a total blast for Bat fans all at the same time. The first issue in this mini didn't excite me anything like Batman and Flashpoint has been, but this issue is what I was looking for from the Thomas Wayne Batman. I'm not saying anything else. If you're reading Flashpoint and you try no other tie-ins, I think this is the one to go for. And my favorite Marvel book for the last 2 weeks is Venom, number 4. I've complained before that I don't love the art in this book, and I don't know if it's just growing on me after a few issues or if it just looks better with a giant Venom Spidey fight, but I really like Tony Moore's drawing in this issue. The fight is really rough, and Spider-Man's just ruthless, knowing Betty's in trouble and just plain sick of dealing with Venom. Now with yet another new host, and he, of course, has no idea who it is. A really dense comic with a lot going on, not just all the intense action, but also some very dramatic and complicated problems for Flash Thompson to deal with. More and more, this feels like a Spider-Man book. I mean, Flash has to wrestle with whether his superhero persona is hurting more than it's helping, and whether or not he's really a hero. And here he comes right out and says that he's not. The Venom symbiote is the literal embodiment of Spider-Man's classic struggle of the human versus the costume, constantly having to answer the questions of whether it would have been better if he'd never put it on at all. The parallels are especially striking and ironic when Flash and Peter are talking out of costume, especially when it's brought up that Flash has always been Spidey's biggest fan. I could dissect this one for several minutes. Very good story, and lots of it. And at the risk of being predictable, my favorite DC book for the last 2 weeks is Flashpoint number 3. I kind of hate ending this list off with a book I don't really want to talk much about, but like Fear itself, I really want you to experience this for yourself without ruining it for you. Just like the rest of this thing so far, it's unpredictable and just nuts. Nuts in a good way. The cover gives away that we finally see the real Superman here, and he is not at all what I expected. I'm never sure how to take the idea people throw around Barry here that Superman's a good person no matter his upbringing, but the verdict's still out on that, and he's one of the most radically altered characters because his past is so completely different, as he was found by the government, as we see in Project Superman #1, and not by the Kents. That's what I'm loving about Flashpoint. It's filled with good ideas. This is an idea that people have had for a long time. What if Superman were discovered as a kid and dissected by scientists? I've said it before, but I'm a sucker for good alternate timelines, and this, so far, is really one of my favorites. Some of the tie-ins have been really interesting, but the main title continues to be more thrilling each issue. Now, this week was somewhat of a slower week than last week, so I do just have one indie book and one kids book. My kids book this time is Sonic the Hedgehog number 226, and this is the beginning of the Sonic Genesis arc. I know I reviewed another Sonic book a few weeks back, but I've really been curious about this Genesis arc. Yep, it's just what you'd expect. It's part of the first Sonic game with a plot. Not a really complicated plot, of course. It's pretty much just the video game with some of the mainstay comic book characters meeting Sonic for the first time. It just covers the first two levels, Green Hill Zone and Marble Zone, and as this series seems to do a lot, it finds clever ways to use familiar video game ideas and sometimes make fun of itself, like when Sonic breaks apart the box after beating the boss from the first level, which still has the giant ball that swings back and forth. And while releasing all the animals, Sonic says, "Does everything this Eggman guy builds explode?" There's also a place where Eggman tells Sonic he has a big master plan, and then in a thought bubble he reveals to the reader that he really doesn't know what he's going to do with the big Death Egg he just built, and he's just making this all up as he goes along. I really enjoyed seeing these classic levels in comic book form, and it'll be interesting to see what's done with them as the art progresses. I hope we'll see some stuff past the first game. Is this purely for the sake of nostalgia? Yep. And I'm not really looking for especially deep story from Sonic, so I guess I'm okay with that, especially since it's also quite clever and funny. And finally, for my indie book this week, I went for Screamland number 2 from Image. I'm not usually into adult humor like this, but it's over the top, quirky, and fun, even while it's about the Hollywood monsters who just played themselves in the movies and are all mostly washed out actors now. They go searching for a disgusting porno that will destroy their images if found. The Invisible Man was killed in the last issue, and this thing is filled with hysterical gags, one of them being that they know the Invisible Man was killed, but they can't see his body because it's invisible. Former spaceman engineer Travis Walters and the Wolfman try to solve the case on their own since they don't want to go to the police for fear that they'll find the porno they're looking for. And Walters keeps swearing he's a great detective just because he played one in a bad movie once. My favorite bit in the issue is the backstory for the Mass, the big blob who used to be really famous, but like so many others, the novelty of watching a giant blob attack people wore off, and now he has to sign at fan conventions for money. He and the Midnight Slasher are the prime suspects, and our protagonists follow them, trying to get clues in the case. The book is well paced, and the jokes come a mile a minute. Many of them infusing the story with familiar horror tropes, like the slasher running, but looking like he's just walking so the Wolfman can't catch up. Having not read the previous Screamland stuff, I still had no problem reading this, and I fully enjoyed it. And as if that weren't enough, I read some other books this week that I think might be worth your time. First, we've got Moon Knight number 3. We get some background about what Moon Knight did when he first got to Los Angeles. And FF number 5. Sue finally meets one of the alternate Reeds. And finally, the book I'm most kind of still hoping won't go away after the relaunch, Batman Beyond number 7. The big fight between Terry and Blight, and Bruce has something up his sleeve for Powers. Finally, I wanted to mention some Batman trades that came out this week, just in case you're looking for them. Gotham Central, Book 2. Batman R.I.P. in paperback. And finally, the Knight and the Squire mini, which I quite enjoyed. And if you're ever in the Kansas City area, be sure to check out Pop Culture Comics right here in Overland Park, Kansas on 87th Street. That's where I'm at this very moment and my very favorite place to get comic books. Thanks a lot for watching. I'm Captain Logan. Happy reading.